Hello and welcome to the Memory Card. For the month of November, I've been focusing on my favorite game series of all time, The Legend of Zelda, and I've got to talk about some of the biggest games in the franchise to me, and this week we're going to be talking about a very special one. This game shook up the Zelda formula in a way that was never really matched or exceeded until Breath of the Wild. And it's a bit of a dark horse of the franchise because it followed up one of the biggest games ever made, Ocarina of Time. And in the wake of that, it's not surprising that it didn't sell quite as well because this game did quite a lot different in comparison to the Zelda games that came before it and since. It's none other than Majora's Mask for the Nintendo 64. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask came out on the Nintendo 64 in the year 2000, and it's still one of the most daring and unique entries in the Zelda franchise. And this was also the first Zelda game where the development was led by Eiji Aonuma, and he has since been the main lead for the Zelda franchise ever since. And also Yoshiaki Koizumi, who you might know from the Switch presentation in January, and also all the Nintendo Directs for 2017. He also led development alongside Mr. Aonuma. And it's still crazy to me just how inventive Nintendo got with this game, since this was just the fourth Zelda game released on home consoles. The formula was still fresh from A Link to the Past and Ocarina of Time, and yet Nintendo was still so bold with Majora's Mask. In the many ways this game changed up the Zelda formula is still one of the reasons why it is so revered among Zelda fans. The main defining aspects of Majora's Mask are the 3-day mechanic and the masks. Link has 3 days to stop Skull Kid from destroying the land of Termina by smashing the moon into Clocktown, the main hub of the game, and this gives the narrative a sense of urgency that isn't really matched in any other game in the franchise. However, Link is able to reset the 3-day cycle at any point with the Ocarina of Time. And you'll be doing that a lot, considering it's the only way to permanently save your file in the original Nintendo 64 release, which was not something I knew the first time I played, which led to some frustration replaying the first section of the game a couple times until I realized what I was doing wrong. And every time Link resets the clock, his good deeds are undone, aside from being able to keep your main items, hearts, and other sort of things. And that helps drive you further to stop Skull Kid, so things can get set back to normal for good, instead of just temporarily. Now, as you might expect, masks also play a huge role in this game, and they help make it such a standout title. There are the main transformation masks that you run around as a Deku Scrub, a Zora, or a Goron, and all these are so much fun and add to the gameplay of Majora's Mask. They not only add to what Link is able to do, but they're also identities for Link to become. See, the thing is, most people in Termina don't pay much attention to Link in contrast to the land of Hyrule. Most of the people in Termina don't even know that they need to be saved, and many of his actions get attributed to the masks he wears, because they are all the essence of heroes of different species from the Zora to the Gorons that died. That not only adds to the gameplay, but also to the somber tone of Majora's Mask. And by the end of everything, most people don't even know that Link saved them. They just go on with their lives, and go on with the ceremony and the festival in Clocktown. And all this helps add to the complex plot that this has for a Zelda game. Majora's Mask is able to mix somber moments with levity in very compelling ways, which help makes this one of the most memorable Zelda games ever made. The land of Termina itself is very distinct from Hyrule, despite sharing a lot of the same faces and textures, considering that this was made from the same engine and a lot of the same assets of Ocarina of Time in just a year of development time. The Deku Scrubs now live in a swamp to the south, rather than some random places throughout Hyrule, and the Gorons live in a mountain range in the midst of unusual winter, and the Zora live in the ocean next to a fantastic beach, rather than a cave in a river. And there is also a desert in the Stone Temple, and all these 4 locations feel very distinct and unique even when compared to the rest of the series. Even though this parallel world shares a lot of the same faces to Hyrule, they're much different this time around, and are often more fleshed out and interesting in comparison to their Hyrule counterparts. In fact, when I think of a lot of these characters, I remember their incarnations in Majora's Mask much more so than from Ocarina of Time. Majora's Mask essentially has 4 dungeons, which is much fewer than most Zelda games, and if you only focused on the main quest, this would be one of the shortest 3D Zelda games ever. Although if you didn't do the many side quests that populate this unforgettable game, then you'd be missing out on what makes Majora's Mask so fantastic and with such amazing charm. The boss fights in this game are also fantastic and memorable, and the dungeons are interesting, but to me, they don't make up the heart of this game in the same way the side quests and the characters do. You get to engage with the people of Termina in more meaningful ways than most Zelda games because of these side quests. You can give people a final moment of solace as they await their lunar Armageddon by seeing their pets grow up, or saving their father from mummification, or help people get the wedding of their dreams, and one of the most memorable side quests ever in a video game with the Anju and Kafe side quest. And these all give more life and personality to Majora's Mask than most video games I have ever played. This game also introduced Tingle to the franchise, which is already a triumph of its own, and he is important to this game like in The Wind Waker. This time around, he supplies your maps to the different areas of Termina, and I love all the weird details about him, like how he floats in the air on big red balloons, not only so he can see more of the area, but also to make him more noticeable to the people around him. So he's got some business savvy this time around. And also, I like the detail where his father runs the tourist spot in the southern swamp, and he is still frustrated by the fact that his 35-year-old son thinks he's a fairy and spends all of his time up in the air making maps, rather than doing something more lucrative. And yet he still has a soft spot for his son and is still a loving father, because there's a little moment where you can show a picture of Tingle, when you can take a picture with a little pictograph that shows up again in The Wind Waker, and you show him that picture, and you get a nice little emotional moment from his father. It's just another little nice detail that helps flush out Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask also took some narrative leaps from Ocarina of Time with its characterizations of its guide character and the antagonist of the game. This time around, you've got a fairy named Tattle accompanying you on Link's quest, and Tattle actually has an arc that's reminiscent of Midna from Twilight Princess. Tattle initially only helps you because her brother Tail was separated from her while she was bullying you, and Skull Kid left. Throughout the adventure, Tattle becomes more selfless and appreciative of Link, and comes to value the people around her. While Tattle doesn't match Midna as far as characters go, she is certainly a step up from Navi in Ocarina of Time, and is in her own right a very memorable and great character in the franchise. Skull Kid is also immediately effective as a villain because right off the bat of the game, he takes Epona from you while you're going through the forest trying to find Navi, since Navi left you from Ocarina of Time, which already sets up a somber tone for the beginning of Majora's Mask, because you're not out on an epic quest from the start, you're just trying to get your friend back. And yet Skull Kid comes around and takes Epona, turns you into a Deku Scrub, and you're left to your own devices to try and unravel his plans. Also, the fight with Majora at the end is also really great and unnerving as well, because of his different forms are all just really creepy, but also memorable. Although, if you get the Fierce Deity mask from getting all the masks, it is one of the easiest boss fights there is in any game. I do enjoy the dungeons in Majora's Mask quite a lot, but there is more stress for me during these dungeons because of the hunt for the 15 stray fairies in each dungeon. You see, not only has Skull Kid plotted to destroy Termina by crashing the moon into Clocktown, but he's also destroyed all the great fairies in Termina, and 4 of them out of the 5 are spread out into 15 stray fairies in each of the dungeons. And you get something pretty meaty and important anytime you collect all the 15 stray fairies in a dungeon and return them back to the great fairy's normal form. But this hunt for those fairies gets more difficult if you don't slow down time with the ocarina, which I always do. or if you go from the N64 version of the game to the 3DS remake, where the stray fairies are in different locations. However, the way the dungeons use the main transformation masks are all really cool, and this game has one of the most complex and memorable dungeons ever, the Stone Tower Temple. The way that temple uses all the main masks and messes with your expectations is truly an unforgettable experience. However, the Great Bay Temple is definitely not as fun. I'll admit, it's not a dungeon I look forward to whenever I play this game. Majora's Mask is easily one of the most unique and fun Zelda games in the series, and I can't recommend this game highly enough. It is so amazing. This game is also readily available on the Nintendo 64, the GameCube, and the Virtual Consoles for the Wii and the Wii U, but there's also the phenomenal remake on the 3DS I mentioned before. Regardless of where you choose to play, this is one of the standout releases in the Zelda franchise, and it should not be missed. Even though it didn't sell quite as well as the other 3D Zelda games, and it's very different, it is still fantastic. You need to play this game. Majora's Mask was criminally overlooked when it initially released on the Nintendo 64 in the year 2000, 17 years ago, but even though a lot of Zelda fans and Nintendo 64 owners passed on this game back then, you definitely should not. You can play this on a bunch of different Nintendo platforms, and regardless of where you play it, you need to play this game. Although, for my recommendation, I think you should either play it on the Nintendo 64 or on the Nintendo 3DS. Those two versions control the best, partially because of the way the ocarina and the items are used with the C buttons or the actual buttons on the 3DS and the touchscreen. It just works better than the C stick on the GameCube or the right analog stick on the Wii or the Wii U. But this is one of the coolest and most unique games Nintendo has ever made. It has a lot of design philosophies that just hasn't been replicated in other Nintendo games, and that makes this game required playing for any Nintendo fan or Zelda fan. But regardless, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on the memory card where we continue Zelda Month.